In 1648, a master brought 12 students into the mountains. 30 days later, only one returned. The others didn't die. Something worse happened. The people who entered the mountain disappeared. Not physically. Their bodies came back, their names came back, and their faces came back. But the people who walked into those mountains never returned. The master had erased them. Their fears, their excuses, their need for comfort, their dependence on praise, and their addiction to certainty were gone. For 30 days, they endured a transformation so brutal that most men quit before the first week. There were no swords, no armies, and no enemies, only cold, hunger, exhaustion, and silence. They faced the terrifying realization that the greatest obstacle they would ever encounter was themselves. The master called it the 30 days of death, not because it killed the body, but because it killed everything false, the weak habits, the comfortable lies, and the version of yourself that wants greatness but refuses suffering. History remembers warriors who conquered kingdoms, but the rarest warriors were those who conquered themselves. This is the story of one young student who entered those mountains believing he was strong, only to discover he wasn't. Not even close. For 30 days he would be broken, stripped down, humiliated, and pushed beyond every limit he thought he possessed. What emerged at the end was something few human beings ever become. A person who no longer needed motivation, who no longer feared discomfort, and who no longer depended on circumstances to act. Because once a person survives 30 days of deliberate suffering, the world loses its power to control them. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe. Discipline first, excuses later. Chapter 1. The Student. His name was Akio, 22 years old, strong by ordinary standards but weak by the standards of reality. Akio came from a respected family, not wealthy, not poor, comfortable. His father had been a minor warrior and his mother managed the household. His childhood contained enough hardship to make him believe he understood struggle, but there is a difference between hardship and transformation. Hardship happens to you. Transformation is chosen, and almost nobody chooses it willingly. Akio believed he was disciplined. He woke early, trained daily, read philosophy, meditated, and practiced sword forms. Others admired him, and many even envied him, which is exactly why the master chose him. The invitation arrived without warning. A small piece of paper with one sentence: "If you seek your limits, come to the mountain." No signature, no explanation, only a location. Akio recognized it immediately. Everyone did. The mountain belonged to Master Kenta, a man surrounded by stories. Some called him a sage, others called him cruel, but most simply called him dangerous because nobody left his training unchanged. Akio arrived before sunrise. 11 other students were already waiting. Each looked impressive, broad shoulders, sharp eyes, and a confident posture. They were the kind of men who believed they were prepared, the kind of men reality enjoys humiliating. The master appeared as the first light touched the horizon, old, thin, and unremarkable, at least at first glance. But the moment he stepped forward, silence spread through the group, not because he demanded it, but because his presence demanded it. He looked at each student, one by one, without greeting or introduction. Finally, he spoke. "Why are you here?" The answers came quickly. "To become stronger, to master discipline, to unlock my potential, to become the best version of myself." The master listened, expressionless. Then he laughed, not kindly, not cruelly, just honestly. "You are all liars." The students exchanged glances. Akio felt irritation rise. The master continued, "You are not here to become stronger. You are here because your current life is no longer satisfying. You are here because comfort has started feeling like a prison. You are here because a voice inside you keeps whispering that you are capable of more." The mountain became silent again, because every student knew he was right. Then came the first shock. "Everything you brought with you belongs to me now." Confusion spread immediately. Bags, food, blankets, money, books, letters, everything gone. One student protested, "What if we need something?" The master's answer came instantly. Need is often another word for attachment. By midday, every possession had disappeared. The students stood with only simple clothing, nothing else. No comfort, no backup plan, no security. The mountain had already begun its work. That night they received their first instruction: no shelter, no tents, no cabins. Sleep under the open sky. Rain began an hour later, a cold, relentless rain. The students shivered through the darkness. Nobody slept. Everyone suffered. By morning, several were already questioning their decision. The master walked through the exhausted group, calm, rested, and unbothered. "What did you learn?" Nobody answered. Finally, Akio spoke. "The rain was miserable." The master nodded. "Correct." Then he asked another question. "Did your misery stop the rain?" "No." "Did complaining stop the rain?" "No." "Did wishing for comfort stop the rain?" "No." The master looked around. "Then why waste energy on resistance?" The lesson landed heavily. Most suffering wasn't coming from the rain, it was coming from fighting the rain. Chapter 2. The First Death Day 3. The hunger began. Food was restricted, not starvation, just enough to survive, but never enough to feel satisfied. The students became obsessed. Every conversation turned toward food, every thought returned to food, and every memory became food. The master watched, waiting and observing. By day 4, tempers exploded. One student accused another of receiving larger portions, another demanded fairness, another threatened to leave. The master gathered them together, then placed a bowl of fresh, steaming, fragrant rice in the center. There was enough for only one person. Immediately, every eye locked onto it. The master smiled. "You believe hunger is your enemy. It isn't." He pointed at the bowl. "That is your enemy, desire. Hunger is natural. Desire is endless. A hungry man can survive, but a man controlled by desire becomes a slave." Then he kicked the bowl over, spilling the rice into the dirt. Several students gasped, one nearly shouted. The master simply walked away. That night, Akio couldn't stop thinking about the rice, not because he needed it, but because he had wanted it. For the first time, he began noticing something uncomfortable. The mountain wasn't exposing weakness, it was exposing dependence. Dependence on comfort, dependence on certainty, and dependence on getting what he wanted. And every day, that dependence was dying, painfully, slowly, one layer at a time. Day 5. The first student left. There was no dramatic speech and no emotional breakdown. He simply packed his things and walked down the mountain. The master didn't stop him, didn't criticize him, and didn't even acknowledge him. After the student disappeared into the trees, Akio asked a question. "Aren't you disappointed?" The master shook his head. "No." "Why?" "Because he chose honesty." The students looked confused. The master continued. He discovered comfort mattered more to him than transformation. Most people never admit that. The lesson disturbed Akio because he wasn't sure what he would choose if pushed far enough, and the mountain wasn't finished pushing, not even close. The real transformation had not yet begun. Everything so far had merely been preparation, the destruction before the rebuilding, the breaking before the forging, the death before the rebirth. And in the days ahead, the mountain would demand far more than hunger, far more than discomfort, and far more than endurance. It would demand the complete destruction of the person who entered, and only one student would survive what came next. Chapter 3. The Second Death. Day 6. The mountain changed, not physically, but psychologically. Until now, the students had been fighting discomfort. Now, they would begin fighting themselves. The master gathered the remaining 11 students before sunrise. There were no speeches, no encouragement, and no inspiration, only a single command. "Today, you stop speaking." The students exchanged confused glances. One finally asked, "For how long?" The master's answer was immediate, "Until I tell you otherwise." Then he turned and walked away. That was it. No explanation, no philosophy, no discussion, only silence. At first, it seemed easy. Most people believe silence is simply the absence of words, but they are wrong. Silence is the absence of escape. The first few hours passed comfortably. Then something unexpected happened. Thoughts became louder. Without conversation to distract them, the students became trapped inside their own minds. Regrets appeared, embarrassments returned, old failures resurfaced, and forgotten fears crawled out of the darkness. Akio discovered something terrifying. His mind never stopped talking. Every moment, every second, there was a constant stream of judgment, comparison, worry, fantasy, memory, prediction, noise. Endless noise. By the second day of silence, the students looked different, less confident, more exhausted. It wasn't because of physical labor, but because they were finally hearing themselves clearly. The master observed without comment. On the evening of day 7, he gathered them beside a cliff overlooking the valley. "For 2 days you have met your greatest enemy." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The master pointed nowhere and everywhere. Not another person, not circumstances, not fate, your own mind. The words landed heavily because every student knew exactly what he meant. The master continued. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding themselves. They stay busy, they seek entertainment, they chase relationships, and they fill every empty moment, not because they enjoy it, but because silence reveals what they are trying to escape. Akio felt something uncomfortable inside his chest. Recognition. The master was describing him. The master was describing everyone. Then came another command. Tomorrow begins the second stage. The students waited. The body will suffer. The next morning, they learned exactly what that meant. Before sunrise, they began climbing. No destination, no explanation, only climbing. Steeper, higher, harder, hour after hour. The mountain seemed endless. Legs burned, lungs screamed, and shoulders ached. By midday, several students were staggering. By evening, everyone was exhausted. The master finally stopped. One student collapsed immediately, another cursed under his breath, and a third simply stared at the ground. The master looked at them calmly. What hurts? My legs, my back, my lungs. The master nodded, then he asked a strange question. And who is forcing you to continue? Nobody answered because nobody could. The truth was obvious. Nobody was forcing them. The mountain wasn't holding them hostage, and the master wasn't threatening them. At any moment they could leave, yet they stayed. That realization changed everything. The suffering was voluntary, the pain was chosen, and somehow that made it easier to bear. Day 8, the climbing continued. Day 9, more climbing. Day 10, still climbing. No explanation, no purpose, only repetition. The students became frustrated, Akio especially. His mind demanded meaning. Why are we doing this? What is the lesson? What is the goal? The questions multiplied daily. Finally, he confronted the master. Why are we climbing? The master smiled, a dangerous smile. Because you still need a reason. Akio frowned. The master continued. Most people only work when they understand the reward. They only endure when they can see the finish line. They only commit when success is guaranteed. That isn't discipline. That's negotiation. The words hit like a hammer because they were true. Akio wanted certainty, he wanted purpose, he wanted guarantees. The master offered none, only another mountain, another climb, another day. By the evening of day 10, a second student left. No argument, no drama, just departure. 10 remained. The mountain kept working. Chapter 4. The breaking point, day 11. The weather turned. Wind, rain, cold, the kind of cold that crawls into bones. The students were ordered to stand motionless beside a river. No shelter, no movement, no conversation, just standing. Minutes became hours. The cold intensified, bodies trembled uncontrollably, and teeth chattered. Several students looked close to collapse. Akio felt anger rising. What was the point of this? What lesson justified such misery? The answer arrived unexpectedly, not from the master, but from his own mind. For hours he had been repeating the same thought. I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. Then something shifted. The thought disappeared. The cold remained, but the resistance vanished. For a brief moment there was only sensation, no judgment, no complaint, no argument, just cold. And strangely, the suffering decreased. The discomfort remained exactly the same, yet the suffering shrank. The master approached as if he had sensed it. What changed? Akio looked up. The cold is still here. Yes, but I'm no longer fighting it. The master's eyes narrowed for the first time in approval. Very slight, almost invisible, yet unmistakable. Good. Then he walked away. Day 12. The students received less food. Not dangerously less, just enough to intensify the challenge. The body's weakness became obvious, energy dropped, motivation disappeared, and every task felt harder. And that's when the master delivered another lesson. Most people think discipline is acting when motivated. He pointed toward the exhausted students. Motivation is easy. Motivation requires nothing. Discipline begins when motivation dies. The words echoed through the mountain because everyone understood. Nobody wanted to train anymore. Nobody wanted to climb. And nobody wanted discomfort, yet the work continued. And that continuation was the point. Not feeling strong, being strong, not wanting, doing. Day 13. The third student left. 9 remained. The departures no longer surprised anyone. In fact, they began to feel inevitable. Every day revealed another layer of weakness, and every day demanded another sacrifice. The mountain was selecting, not for talent, not for intelligence, not for potential, but for endurance, for commitment, for the ability to continue after every reason to quit appeared. Day 14. The master woke them before dawn. No explanation, they began walking. Hour after hour, no destination, no discussion, only movement. Eventually, they reached the highest ridge in the region. The view stretched endlessly, mountains, forests, valleys, clouds. The world appeared enormous. The master stood facing the horizon, then he asked a question. What do you see? The answers varied. Mountains, forests, the valley. The master shook his head. No. He pointed toward the horizon. You see reality. The students waited. You spend your lives believing your problems are enormous, your fears, your failures, your insecurities. But look, the mountains stood silently, ancient, indifferent. The master continued. The world is bigger than your worries. The moment you understand that, he tapped his chest, this becomes lighter. For several minutes, nobody spoke and nobody moved. The lesson required no further explanation. Day 15, halfway. Only 9 students remained, yet something had changed. The people standing there were not the same people who had arrived. Their bodies were leaner, harder, stronger, but the true transformation was invisible. They complained less, they feared less, and they depended less. The mountain had begun stripping away unnecessary things, not possessions, but identity. The false identity, the comfortable identity, the fragile identity. That version was dying, slowly, painfully, exactly as intended. That evening, the master gathered them around a fire. For the first time in 15 days, he sat among them. The students sensed something important was coming, and they were right. Everything so far has been preparation. The students looked up immediately. The master stared into the flames. The first 15 days weakened your attachments. The next 15 days will reveal who you really are. A silence followed, heavy, dangerous. Then came the announcement. Tomorrow begins the final stage. Nobody asked questions, and nobody needed to. The mountain had already taught them something important. Answers arrive when they're earned, not when they're demanded. The master looked at each remaining student one by one, slowly and carefully, as if measuring something invisible. Then he spoke. Most people never discover their limits. They stop far before reaching them. They mistake discomfort for exhaustion. They mistake exhaustion for inability. And they mistake fear for truth. His eyes settled on Akio, then moved across the others. In the next 15 days, you will discover the difference. Chapter 5, the final stage, day 16. The mountains stopped testing their bodies and began testing their identities. Before sunrise, the master gathered the 9 remaining students. The air was cold, the sky was still dark, and nobody spoke, nobody complained. That version of them had already died. The master placed 9 wooden bowls on the ground. Inside each bowl was a single piece of paper. Take one. The students obeyed. Akio unfolded his to find 3 words. You are alone. He looked around, realizing every student had received the same message. The master nodded. Good. Then he pointed in 9 different directions. Walk. Confusion appeared immediately. One student finally asked, For how long? The master's answer was simple. Until sunset. Alone? Yes. No guidance? No. No destination? No. The student hesitated. The master smiled. You still want certainty. Then the 9 students separated. For the first time since arriving, Akio was completely alone. No companions, no master, no instructions, no purpose. Just mountains, trees, silence, and himself. At first, he hated it. Without tasks to complete, there was nowhere to hide, no suffering to distract him, and no training to occupy his attention. Only awareness. Hours passed. The deeper he walked, the quieter everything became. Eventually, he noticed something strange. His thoughts had changed. The constant noise that dominated the first week was weaker, and the endless internal arguments had slowed. For the first time in his life, he understood what the master had been trying to teach. Freedom wasn't controlling your thoughts. Freedom was realizing you didn't have to obey them. When sunset arrived, he returned. 8 students stood waiting. 1 was missing. The master wasn't surprised, and neither were the others. He found his limit. That was all the master said. No judgment, no criticism, just truth. 8 remained. Day 17. The students received a new challenge: no food, not permanently, just for one day. The reaction was immediate. Fear. It wasn't physical fear, but psychological fear. What if tomorrow is worse? What if there is no food tomorrow either? What if this continues? The master watched carefully, then spoke. Notice something. The students looked up. Most suffering comes from imagination. He pointed toward the empty bowls. You are hungry, true. But most of your pain comes from tomorrow. The realization hit hard. Their minds were suffering from events that hadn't happened. Fear was creating misery in advance. Day 18. Food returned. Nothing extraordinary. Simple rice, simple vegetables. Yet the students treated it like a feast. The master observed quietly, then nodded. Suffering reveals value. The lesson was obvious. Abundance creates blindness, while scarcity creates appreciation. Everything tasted better because nothing was guaranteed. Everything mattered because everything could disappear. Day 19. Another student left. 7 remained. The mountain continued narrowing the path, not through force, but through choice. Every student who left made the same decision: comfort over transformation, safety over uncertainty, familiarity over growth. The master never stopped them, because a path chosen under pressure is still a choice. Day 20. The storms arrived, the worst yet. Rain hammered the mountains, wind tore through the trees, and visibility disappeared. The students spent the entire night exposed, with no shelter, no escape, and no relief. At midnight, one student broke mentally. "I can't do this anymore." The words escaped before he could stop them. The master looked at him calmly. "You can." The student shook his head. "No." The master stepped closer. "You're confusing 2 different things." The student stared. "You don't want to continue. That's different from being unable to continue." Silence. The distinction was brutal because it was true. Most people never reach their limits. They reach the limit of their willingness, not their capability, their willingness. The student survived the night, but the lesson remained. Day 21. The mountain entered its final phase. Everything became harder: less food, longer walks, more isolation, and greater uncertainty. The students expected physical suffering. Instead, they encountered something worse: boredom. Endless boredom. No entertainment, no stimulation, no novelty, nothing. By day 23, 6 students remained. Their faces looked older, sharper, and more serious. Something unnecessary had been removed. The mountain was succeeding, slowly, relentlessly. Day 24. The master finally explained the transformation for the first time. "You believe this training is about becoming stronger." He shook his head. "It isn't." The students listened carefully. "It is about becoming harder to control." That sentence changed everything. The master continued. "If comfort controls your actions, you are controlled. If fear controls your actions, you are controlled. If praise controls your actions, you are controlled. If criticism controls your actions, you are controlled." He looked around slowly. The person who cannot be controlled becomes dangerous. Not dangerous to others, dangerous to limitations, dangerous to excuses, dangerous to weakness, and dangerous to the version of themselves that always chooses the easier path. The students understood. This had never been physical training. Physical suffering was merely the tool. Freedom was the objective. Day 25. Another student left. 5 remained. The mountain was approaching its conclusion, and everyone could feel it. The pressure increased, not because conditions became worse, but because there was nowhere left to hide. Every excuse had been exposed, every weakness had been revealed, and every illusion had been challenged. Day 26. The master gathered the remaining students. "You have come far." Then he pointed toward the valley. Most people live there. The students followed his gaze down to the villages, roads, homes, and normal life. The master continued. They spend their lives waiting for motivation, waiting for confidence, waiting for perfect conditions, waiting for certainty. His eyes hardened. And while they wait, life ends. The students stood silently because every one of them had once lived exactly that way. The master pointed toward them. "You are learning something different. Act first, feel later. Move first, understand later. Commit first, become ready afterward. The mountain had taught them this lesson daily. The path appears after movement, not before. If you've reached this point, like the video and subscribe. Discipline is earned, not wished for. Day 27. The final departures began. One student left at dawn and another left before sunset. 3 remained: Akio, Daiichi, and Riku. They were the strongest, the most stubborn, or perhaps simply the most willing to continue. Day 28. No training, no climbing, no tasks, only waiting. The students hated it. Every instinct wanted action, movement, and progress. The master smiled. You still believe progress must look dramatic? Then he sat and waited. By evening, they understood. Stillness was its own challenge. Patience was a form of strength, and doing nothing intentionally was harder than constant activity. Another illusion shattered. Day 29. The final test. The master brought the 3 students to a narrow ridge thousands of feet above the valley. Wind roared around them, but the old man looked impossibly calm. Then he asked a question. "Why are you still here?" Daiichi answered first. "To become stronger." The master shook his head. "Wrong." Riku answered, "To master discipline." Then the master turned to Akio. The young student thought carefully, longer than before finally answering, "I'm here because leaving would mean returning to who I was." The mountain became silent. The master smiled for the first time, a genuine smile. Correct. Strength wasn't the goal, discipline wasn't the goal, and transformation wasn't even the goal. The real goal was refusing to return to unconscious living, refusing to become the person comfort had once controlled. Day 30, the final morning. 3 students remained. The master stood waiting, calm as always. Then he spoke. "The transformation is complete." The students looked confused. That was it? No ceremony, no final challenge, no revelation? The master seemed to read their thoughts. "The revelation already happened," he pointed toward them. "You just haven't noticed." The students looked at each other, then slowly they understood. The people standing there were not the people who had arrived, not even close. The young men who entered the mountain needed comfort. These men did not. The young men who entered needed certainty. These men did not. The young men who entered required motivation. These men did not. The transformation had happened gradually, quietly, and without announcement, exactly like all real transformation. Strength had always existed, discipline had always existed, and courage had always existed. The mountain hadn't created those qualities, it had revealed them. Everything else had simply been in the way. The fear, the excuses, the dependence, and the distractions were gone. Finally, the master looked toward the valley. "You may leave. No celebration, no applause, no reward, only freedom."